Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, I have with me Doug Madenford. He's a PA Dutch author and educator. Doug, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about your background.
Okay, so born and raised in Berks County, Pennsylvania, just north of Reading in a little town of Centerport. Grew up in a very traditional Pennsylvania Dutch family, not Amish and Mennonite. We were the fancy Dutch, as we like to call ourselves. But all four of my grandparents spoke Pennsylvania Dutch and English, of course. So I spent a lot of time with all of my grandparents, and that really instilled this idea of what Pennsylvania Dutch was, the language, the culture, the history. And that kind of pushed me along. So I went through high school, studied German in high school, went on to college and got my degrees in German and history, and then became a high school history teacher, or high school German teacher. I also teach a little bit of history on the side, and got my master's from Millersville in German. And I've been really active professionally, of course, as a German educator. But then at some point in grad school, this started to really tug at me about the Pennsylvania Dutch aspect, and I've been working as hobby/side job with a YouTube channel and website and multiple publications, all dealing with Pennsylvania Dutch, whether it's the language, culture, history, all aspects of our story here in America.
Okay, very, very interesting. And when you were talking about Millersville and German, it made me. Do you know Leroy Hopkins?
Oh, of course. Yes, I
Yes,
know him
yes,
well. Yeah.
yes, yeah. So I enjoy his presentations.
He is
Um,
excellent. Yes.
yeah, he is. Um, and then so you were you said you were not Amish or Mennonite, but were your families at some point Amish or Mennonite? No.
No, we
Okay.
when you get east of Lancaster, of course, and you get into like Berks County and the Lehigh Valley and Bucks and Montgomery, there you'll find a lot of the more Pennsylvania Dutch families that have been in Pennsylvania since the beginning of the Commonwealth,
Hmm.
that immigrated with those original Amish and Mennonite families, but were not Amish and Mennonite,
Yeah.
mainly Protestant, Lutherans, Reformed, what is today the UCC, and that's my story. All four sides of my family were all either Lutheran or Reformed, and we've been here since my paternal grandmother's family was one of the first families to settle in the Ole Valley of Berks County.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm 12th generation here in Pennsylvania, and we have no Amish or Mennonite
Yeah.
in our background. No.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, although I did just learn, um, I have a family friend who grew up around Fleetwood, and
Uh-huh.
that those public schools taught German, like they were only in German until not that long ago. Yeah, so that makes sense to me
Yeah, okay.
now that you're saying that. Um, so what kind of, I guess you kind of told me, but I'll ask a little bit more. What drew you into Pennsylvania Dutch as a culture or language or history?
Well, I have to go back to Millersville, I guess. While at Millersville, doing my graduate work, I got introduced to Dr. C. Richard Beam, who anybody from Millersville would probably know him. He was a German professor at Millersville for like 30 some plus years. And he'd always been very active in Pennsylvania Dutch studies. He authored a massive dictionary, English and Pennsylvania Dutch. And when I got to meet him and he found out that I had this background and that I had grown up hearing the language and was, understood a lot of stuff, he was the one that kind of said, hey, you really can do something with this. And, at that point in my life, Pennsylvania Dutch had just been part of of kind of like who I was,
Yeah.
but no one was going around. I didn't know that there was literature out there. I didn't know that there was, that stuff had been done before, documenting and teaching the language, because it really was just something that we spoke at home,
Hmm.
or among friends of the family, stuff like that. And it was really Dr. Beam who kind of pushed me in this direction of, you can do something with this. And then not long after that, as social media started to become really something, and
Hmm.
the invention of things like YouTube, that's where I saw, as someone that wasn't 60 years old or older, which a lot of the speakers of Pennsylvania Dutch tend to be because of our
Right.
story and what happened to the language over the years. I decided it was, I'm going to take this advantage and utilize what's now available to us. So things like YouTube and things like Facebook and Instagram, to tell our story to people that maybe never had the opportunity to grow up with it like I did,
Hmm.
and also people that grew up with it but never truly understood what it was, or they didn't learn. And these platforms have given me the opportunity to connect and reconnect people with their own culture and language and story. And that's what, when I get a lot of comments from people that watch my videos or that utilize my blog posts or some of the publications that we've done, a lot of the comments I get are, you take me right back to my grandparents' kitchen,
Uh-huh.
or these are things that I always heard growing up, but I had no idea what it meant. I
Yeah.
don't know, my family did X for a tradition, but I don't know why we did it and what the significance was. And we're able to tell them, there is a reason why your family did this, and here's the story why.
Yeah.
Or, you were called a schnickel fritz by your grandparents and you never knew what that really actually meant. Well, here's what that word means.
Right.
And it's been very rewarding to help people understand themselves better and their own story
Hmm.
here in America. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is, the Pennsylvania Dutch have been around for 300 plus years. We've been here since the beginning, and we have a very important part in the American story. And we, for generations and decades, we didn't we didn't tell that story because,
Right.
as you're aware, living in Lancaster, one of the main aspects of Pennsylvania Dutch culture, whether we're talking about the Amish or the Mennonite, or we're talking about the fancy Dutch, is this
Hmm.
idea of humility. And
Right.
you aren't supposed to go and brag about the stuff that you do. You aren't supposed to brag and be loud. And we didn't do that because our culture kind of like suppressed it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have shed that aspect of our
Mhm.
culture, at least in the sense of that we do have a story to tell,
Right.
and we have a really wonderful story to tell, and it's one that should be told. So, and social media, of course, and YouTube has been able to allow me to reach audiences that, of course, if those didn't exist, I never would have been able to have reached.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's very interesting. Combination of the new medias and
Mhm.
being able to kind of, there's no gatekeepers. You can just go and do
Not
it
anymore.
yourself.
You're
Yeah.
exactly right. You're exactly
and
right.
and connecting people. I think that that's really important. And I was thinking as you were talking about, some of the words, like I was born in Colorado, so I am not, my husband is a Lancastrian, but my family was here in the, the mid 1700s, and within a generation they were in Missouri. But those words, like, and it kind of reminds me of like the way Yiddish is used, in
Hmm.
and around New York. Like there's just a few words that you like pick up and you know what it means, but so I think it kind of works in the same way in this area.
It does. And
Yeah.
ironically, and a lot of people maybe don't realize this, is that Yiddish and Pennsylvania Dutch are very close to each other. I've had multiple conversations with Yiddish speakers where they're speaking in Yiddish and I'm speaking in Pennsylvania Dutch, and we understand each other because both languages developed in the same region of Europe,
Oh, okay.
going
Yeah.
back in history. So just a
Yeah.
little kind of cool tie to that.
Oh, that
Yeah.
is very much so. So you have a website. So tell
Mhm.
me about your PA Dutch 101.
So padutch101.com is the website that is kind of like I've been running this for, I don't even know how many years now, probably going on 12, 13 years. And I do about a monthly blog post about something Pennsylvania Dutch related, but it's also a place that anybody can go that wants to learn more about Pennsylvania Dutch. It has links to all of the videos that I've produced through my YouTube channel. It also has links to other places that people can go to learn more or to go experience Pennsylvania Dutch culture. Um, yeah, and then I have a link to I have a podcast as well, so they can link to that. And we have an online merchandise shop with all Pennsylvania Dutch theme related stuff,
Yeah.
kind of more younger stuff, not necessarily like old school stuff.
Yeah.
So that's another place that people can go there as kind of like a central location that can then link them to all the other things that we're doing.
Okay, very, very good. So, tell me about PA Dutch Christmas traditions. and I'm sure that they vary, depending on the denomination of the person, but I'm sure there's
Yeah.
commonality too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Probably the one that most people are familiar with, and even people that aren't Pennsylvania Dutch might have heard of, is of course the Belsnickel.
Yeah.
So the Belsnickel is our traditional Christmas gift giver in Pennsylvania Dutch culture, and this is a tradition that we brought with our immigrant forefathers and foremothers brought with from the old country to Pennsylvania. This idea of uh, where it and how far back it actually goes, there's a lot of scholarly debate over. But
Mhm.
the idea is that Belsnickel is a guy who comes door to door and he walks. He isn't flying with reindeer or anything like that, like Santa Claus. He's usually dressed in furs. He's dirty. His face is usually dirty. He's carrying switches or sticks in one hand and his small bag of gifts in the other. He's supposed to be scary. And in the tradition, of course, people actually played this part and would go from farmhouse to farmhouse and visit these families. It was usually somebody that was local. So when they would come to your house, the children of the house would have to either recite a poem or sing a song to the Belschnickel. And then they'd get yelled at a little bit. This idea that, no matter how good of a kid you are, you probably weren't perfect all year long.
Nobody
And
is.
no, right, exactly. And then typically the Belschnickel maybe would swap you up the backside lightly, not necessarily like aggressively or anything like, but this idea that, you were to be scared of the Belschnickel a little bit. And then at the end of the night, he would give you a small gift. Traditionally, if we go way back in history, it would have been like walnuts, or eventually as like chocolate became
Mm,
more accessible,
yeah.
chocolate might be given. And then eventually oranges became a popular gift from the Belschnickel, and maybe a small toy, but nothing like we're not thinking like Santa Claus here that's bringing, gifts and gifts and gifts.
Right.
But since it was somebody local, the tradition, I mean, it was cool because this guy, whoever's playing the part, knew the family. So
Hmm.
when he'd come in, he could talk to these kids and tell them stories. Oh, yeah, I heard, Susie, that over the summer you hit your brother, out back. And as a little kid, you're like, oh my God, the Belschnickel knows all these things. How's he know
Right.
this?
Yeah.
This aspect to the story. And in Pennsylvania Dutch country, southeastern Pennsylvania, people were still doing this, like actually going door to door, well up until in the mid 1900s. There are still a few people that carry on the tradition, that actually dress up. Nowadays, you see a lot of these people doing these at like Christmas markets or
Hmm.
festivals around this
Yeah.
time of year. The actual number of legitimate Belschnickels going door to door anymore is
Hmm.
probably pretty low.
Right.
But you will still see, his representation in folk art and is still absolutely there. And we got a little bit of a boost a couple years ago when the famous TV show The Office was on. One of the main characters, Dwight Schrute, dressed up like the Belschnickel in one of these episodes and brought this story to, like, the whole country then
Uh-huh.
heard about the Belschnickel. And it wasn't 100% accurate, but it wasn't 100% wrong either. So
Right.
we got a little bit of positive publicity there through The Office and Dwight Schrute playing the Belschnickel.
That's fun. Was that for a Christmas party? I didn't see that
Yeah,
episode.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing a Christmas party and the
Yeah.
Belschnickel came and he played it up. He played it up really
Oh,
well.
that's funny. Was the Bauschnickel across like all denominations, like the plain families would also do that, or
That's a great question.
okay.
And since I did not grow up plain, I'm not 100% sure if like old order Amish would have had that tradition. But
Right.
there are other Pennsylvania Dutch Christmas traditions, and the Belschnickel is probably the best known. And
Mhm.
some of these have completely fallen out of tradition because time has elapsed.
Right.
But one that I always thought was really cool, and there probably are some farmers that still do this. The majority of our history, we were an agricultural
Right. Yeah.
culture society, and it was believed that on Christmas Eve, the dew that formed on Christmas Eve night had special powers.
Okay.
And traditionally, you would put some hay or feed out to allow it to collect the dew, and then that would be fed to your animals Christmas morning. The idea was that this dew would bless this hay or whatever they were eating. You were feeding
Uh-huh.
them, and it would protect these animals from illness throughout the year. That was an old tradition that would have been
Right.
from brought from Europe over medieval practices, these types of things
Hmm.
that we carried over in Pennsylvania for quite a while,
Yeah.
actually, that was still documented, people doing that and people still believing it. And then we have a ton of New Year's
Well,
traditions
that's
as
I when
well.
when you said that, it made me think of pork and sauerkraut for New Year's.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's a Pennsylvania
yeah.
Dutch thing that we brought to the New World. And you know, when I tell when I give talks, you know, and I mention these certain things like this, a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, my family did that, but I don't know why we did it." You know, and
Yeah.
pork and sauerkraut's a great example.
Mhm.
There's a reason why we eat pork and sauerkraut traditionally in the Pennsylvania Dutch culture. Why is it pork? Well, when you think about how a pig eats, a pig roots its nose forward when it eats, and a
Mhm.
poultry chicken scratches backwards when it eats. And the Pennsylvania Dutch see that as we want to go forward into the new year, so we eat pork. Plus, pork
Yeah.
was always readily available on the Pennsylvania Dutch farms. That's I mean,
Right. Yeah.
the case.
And
Sauerkraut.
the Germans like their pork.
Oh, they absolutely do. They absolutely do. And sauerkraut too. You know, sauerkraut is, well, it's a very healthy food.
Mhm.
Another thing we have to think about, if we're in the 1800s or the 1700s, what foods did you have readily available on your farm before refrigeration at this
Right.
time of year? You know, well, you would have had sauerkraut that you made that
Mhm.
was in your cold cellar or in your root cellar. So you had it on hand. B, cabbage plays a very high value in Germanic culture.
Mhm.
It's a food that is often eaten. It's seen as something that's healthy, which it is, of course. So you know, it makes sense that we do these things. Of course, we say it brings you good luck if you eat pork and sauerkraut on New Year's Day. Whether it actually does or not, you know, that's for you to believe or not believe. But I would never not have it on New Year's. I'm never going to risk it. I will tell you that.
Right. You don't know. Yeah, that just made me think of my sister-in-law. Her baby was like 6 months old, and right after New Year's, he had an allergic reaction to medicine, actually. But the doctor's like, what have you been feeding him?" She's like, "Well, he had pork and sauerkraut. He needs to have a good year."
Absolutely, absolutely.
So that's funny. So, what trends or challenges do you see in keeping, PA Dutch even as a culture and or as a language among, English people, or as you were calling, what did you call it, fancy plain?
The fancy and the plain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean those
Yeah.
are old terms that have
Yeah.
been used
Yeah.
for a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah, I mean challenges definitely exist, of course. You know,
Yeah.
the last generation of true native speakers of Pennsylvania Dutch that aren't Amish or Mennonite
Mhm.
were my grandparents' generation. So the children that grew up in the Depression, the World War II generation,
Mhm.
they were the last solid generation of kids growing up speaking Pennsylvania Dutch as a first or second language.
Mhm.
Um, you know, after World War II, usage of the language dropped off greatly for a lot of reasons. One, you know, we were fighting Germans in World War II. It wasn't
Mhm.
very a good thing to be going
Right.
around speaking a German language. Also, the fact that, you know, post World War II America, as we get into the economic boom of the 50s and 60s, there was no economic reason to keep speaking Pennsylvania Dutch for most families. A lot
Right.
of families had moved off the farm. Now they were living in more urban settings, doing
Yeah.
jobs that weren't traditional, and the language just naturally died off
Mhm.
among for a lot of families.
Yeah.
Also, there was no education done in the language either. There was no public school in Berks County or Lancaster County that was teaching Pennsylvania Dutch. So
Right.
naturally, if you know, if that happens, you're going to lose the language, or you're going to lose a lot of the language, let's say. But
Right.
for whatever reason, well, the Pennsylvania Dutch are pretty stubborn people. A lot of families didn't give it up either. I mean, I'm an
Right.
example. You know, I grew up in
Right.
the night. I was born in 1980. Growing up in the 80s, I still heard it. I still, you know, I was taught it, so to
Mhm.
speak. And so the challenge, of course, one of the major challenges is that there are a lot of people that don't want the language to die. And the language will never die as long as the Amish keep speaking it.
Right.
Because, you know, the Amish are the fastest growing ethnic minority in America. They double every 20 years in population, and
Mhm.
they are still using it as their main language in the home. So the
Right.
language will never disappear unless something catastrophic happens, I think.
Mhm.
Now, the language among us people that, you know, us non-plain Pennsylvania Dutch,
Mhm.
yes, of course, the number of speakers is quite low and dwindling.
Yeah.
However, one of the great things that the internet has brought us is the fact that we are now able to teach the language on platforms that never would have been, you know, that didn't exist
Right.
before.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Berks History Center, I got to give them a plug, based in Reading there. They've been doing online Pennsylvania Dutch language courses now through Zoom for the last 2.5 years. And the response has been amazing. Nothing short of amazing. They're now offering three different levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. They do in-house. You can actually go in person if
Uh-huh.
if you live close enough. But
Yeah.
then they also have this Zoom option. The majority of the students are Zoom, and they're ranging from anywhere from high school kids to 80-year-olds that are
Hmm.
taking these classes. And they do about I think it's like 3 semesters a year,
Yeah.
and the numbers just continually either hold steady at 20 to 30 people a class, and they continue to grow in a lot of aspects too. So, I mean, these are things that, 15 years ago, if you'd have asked me, hey, we're going to be able to teach Pennsylvania Dutch online to anybody in the world, as long as, I would have been like, yeah, okay, whatever. I would have,
Right.
honestly, I would have put a thought, who would want to do it? Like, who out there wants to do this? But I'm continuing through the work that I do through my YouTube channel, through my social media. I am continually astounded at the amount of people that reach out to me saying how hungry they are for this information, whether it's the language, culture, cooking videos, history, the history of our people, things
Yeah.
like that. So, I mean, yeah, the challenges that existed in 1990 and
Mhm.
early 2000s, a lot of those have been combated
Right.
with modern technology.
Yeah.
And as long as we have people like myself, and there's a lot of other people out there that are doing this
Hmm.
work,
Yeah.
that as long as we have the drive and the dedication that can keep going, I see it. I honestly, and I say this to a lot of people, I have really realized over the last, right before COVID is when I really started to notice that the Pennsylvania Dutch was becoming cool, and it had never been
Yeah.
cool before,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, there were a lot of people that were ashamed to say they were Pennsylvania Dutch for generations.
Hmm.
And, the stigma of what we used to call the dumb Dutchman. Oh, you had this accent, you talked funny, maybe your English wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
You had these old traditions that you were doing that no one else was doing. There was this stigma attached to our culture for quite a long time. And that stigma has died out. I mean, maybe some of it is still there, but I think for most people, they're now realizing that we do have this story to
Hmm.
tell, and it's rich, and
Yeah.
it's a very important part of the American story, and there's nothing to be ashamed of to be Pennsylvania Dutch. And through things like social media, people are realizing that they can connect with us, and oh, I can get a T-shirt that has an Elvidrich on or
Yeah.
with a Belsnickel, and all of a sudden there's this reawakening, this renaissance of it being something to celebrate instead of something to just put in the corner.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that I'm seeing the most over the last couple years, and it really makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Um,
That would be pretty
Absolutely.
affirming. Yeah. And the I that when I so we moved here when I was 10, and so I went to high school in Lancaster, and I took a local history class, but it was focused just on history. It wasn't focused on like culture, and I think that probably would be different now. But I think that this would be a very interesting topic to delve into.
Yeah, I mean, one hurdle that a lot of us talk about that are involved in this, especially those of us that are educators like
Mhm.
myself,
Yeah.
is that and we've struggled with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Education over this. We would love to see more of our history being brought into the curriculum across the
Hmm.
state, and
Yeah.
if not across the state, at least in this southeast corner of Pennsylvania,
Right.
where
Yeah.
in the average classroom, you might have 50% of your students sitting in there that are Pennsylvania Dutch
Right.
ethnically and have no idea that who they are or what their family story is. And we've always gotten a lot of pushback from the Commonwealth in regards to, well, if we do this for this culture, then we got to do it for all the cultures. We can have that's another argument to have.
Yeah.
However, the fact that I don't think you can tell this, you can't. It's not that I don't think you can't tell the story of Pennsylvania
Right.
without at least our telling part of our story too.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
from the beginning on, we were one of the first ethnic groups to come
Hmm.
and buy land from William Penn. He actively sold land in the part of Germany and the Rhine Valley in
Hmm.
Switzerland where we all come from. So
Yeah.
I mean, we've been here from the beginning, and you can't talk about any major event in Pennsylvania history without some connection to Pennsylvania Dutch culture or the people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I agree. So as we're getting ready to wrap up, is there anything that you thought of while we were talking that you want to share before we kind of do the last couple wrap up questions?
I mean, I just appreciate any opportunity I get to talk about this stuff because
Mhm.
there are people out there that constantly be like, they'll stumble across my YouTube channel, for example, which I've been doing for over 10 years, and they'll always say the same thing, like, I didn't know this existed. I've been looking for something like this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm always just, well, I'm just glad you found it,
Right.
But
Yeah.
so any opportunity that I get and the other people that do this work get to tell our story, to a bigger audience, to a different audience, we appreciate it. We truly, truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Is there anything that you would like to promote?
Well, sure. I'll do a little bit of self-promotion here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I've mentioned my YouTube channel a lot. You can absolutely check out our website, padutch101.com. But really, the YouTube channel is where most of my work is. We have over 1,000 videos on the YouTube channel, ranging from videos that teach the language. Every Friday, I put out a video of a Pennsylvania Dutch word of the week, where I do one version in English. I tell you what the word is. I give you an example of it in a sentence, and then you can use it throughout the week. And then I also do the exact same video all in Pennsylvania Dutch for people that are learning the language or that already speak it. But we do cultural videos on there. We do cooking videos. We do history videos. We do music videos.
Yeah.
And then the last 3 years, I've been doing a monthly live stream show called PA Dutch Live. It happens once a month, usually the second or third Wednesday of the month. It depends on my guest for the month. And then that goes live from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then it's stored on the YouTube channel. You can watch it at any time. But you can watch live as we go and interact with me and my guest. Every month I have somebody on that is talking about something Pennsylvania Dutch related. We've had people come on to talk about Pennsylvania Dutch tombstones and the art related.
Oh, yeah.
We've had people come on to talk about clothing traditions among the Pennsylvania Dutch. We've had people come on to talk about historic barns and our folk art. And I mean, it ranges from tons and tons of topics. So that's another thing that people can check. It's fun. It's not like it's an educational opportunity, but we try to make it fun too. And all the stuff I do, I try to bring in some aspect of fun, because that's when people want to learn the most. I think when they're
Right.
enjoying it, they're having fun, they can connect easier with it. So I definitely, check out the YouTube channel, PA Dutch 101. And like I said, there is just an absolute treasure trove of videos there that you can check, all broken up into different playlists. So
Okay, very good. And then how can our listeners get in contact with you? Should they go to the website or?
yeah, you can go to the website, and then you can email me through the website, info@padutch101. But if you're on Instagram or Facebook, I have a PA Dutch 101, an Instagram account where I post tons of PA Dutch themed stuff, of course, and also a Facebook page called PA Dutch 101 as well, where I also post tons of stuff as well. And then you can get in contact directly with me through both of those social media sites.
Okay, very good. And I will make sure that where we post the episode, that I'll have all those links there too. So if
Oh,
somebody's
wonderful. Thank you.
listening and didn't get a chance to write it down, they can just go there and click right through. So
Sure.
thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I feel like I learned some things. I might try my hand at Pennsylvania Dutch, although language is not my not my talent.
I hear you. Yeah, people struggle sometimes, but I always say the same thing. I've been teaching language for 25 years almost now. And it's the same with, like, if you're learning an instrument, you just got to do it.
Yeah.
And you're going to make mistakes and you're going to sound funny at first, but that's okay. That's the only way you're going to, and you have to get over that hurdle of, I don't want anybody to hear me make a mistake or sound dumb. You just got to say, I don't care. I'm going to say it. I'm going to try. So we're going to have a real quick lesson and everybody can use this. I'm going to teach you the phrase Merry Christmas. It's two
Merry
words
Christmas,
in German as well, or in Pennsylvania Dutch. So it's Halliger
Halliher
Gristdag.
Gristdag.
Halliger Gristdag.
Halliher Gristdag.
That's really close. That was good enough for me.
Okay,
That's what
very
everybody
good.
can use.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.